On the night of August 18, 2012, Alicia Bronfield's life was tragically cut short in a hotel room on a night that was supposed to celebrate love, as tensions escalated with her boss, Brian Cooper. A simple rejection spiraled into a brutal attack that would leave her fighting for her life and that of her unborn daughter. In those desperate moments, Alicia fought back fiercely, pleading for her life and for the sake of her unborn daughter, Ava. She cried out, "Think of the baby. Don't do this to me because of the baby." Instead of calling for help or showing any remorse, he committed an unthinkable act. At Alicia's lifeless body. In his chilling confession, he stated simply, "I just wanted to see her naked." What drives a seemingly ordinary boss to commit an unspeakable act of violence against a young woman who only sought to assert her independence? How does obsession transform into a deadly need for control, leading to the tragic murder of an innocent mother-to-be? Alicia was born on August 28, 1990, in Joliet, Illinois, which is not far from Plainfield. She had spent her entire life in this lovely state. Alicia belonged to a big family. Her father was named James, and her mother was Sherry. She also had a stepfather named Joe and a stepmother named Amy. Alicia was one of 5 children, with 3 brothers, Luke, Chase, and Colton, and a sister named Brianna. Although we don't know much about her childhood, it seems she grew up in a loving home. Her mother, Sherry, described Alicia as a joyful person who always made people smile. She was always up for a laugh, Sherry remembered fondly. Alicia never took life too seriously. You could never be bored when she was around. Alicia was known for her lively spirit and kind heart. She loved helping others and was always there for her friends and family. At the time of this tragic tale, Alicia was studying at Western Illinois University. She wasn't just focused on her classes. She was also recognized for her caring nature and generosity. Friends and family often shared how much she cared for everyone around her, making her a cherished member of her community. Alicia Bronfield was just a few months away from achieving her dream of graduating with a degree in criminal justice and forensic psychology. She was filled with excitement about the future, eager to start her career in forensic psychology. Alicia was not only smart but also bursting with hope for what lay ahead. At this time, Alicia was also expecting a baby. She was a mother-to-be, nearing the end of her second trimester, 6.5 months pregnant. Although we don't know the name of the baby's father, it was clear he would not be part of their lives. He was someone Alicia had met in college, but he had chosen not to be involved with her or the baby. This meant that Alicia would be raising her child all by herself, which must have felt overwhelming for her. Despite the challenges of being a single mom, Alicia had a strong support system around her. Friends and family were ready to help her every step of the way. While it was scary to think about being solely responsible for a child, Alicia was also filled with excitement. She couldn't wait to meet her little girl, whom she had already named Ava Lucille. Knowing she was having a girl made her heart soar with joy. By this point in her pregnancy, Alicia was busy preparing for Ava's arrival. She understood that money would be tight since she would be the only one providing for herself and her daughter. Throughout her pregnancy, Alicia was using every bit of extra money she had to buy baby clothes and other important things for when Ava was born, like bottles and diapers. It made sense for her to gather these items little by little instead of facing the big cost of buying everything all at once. She felt lucky to have a steady income each month, even while on maternity leave. Alicia worked at a Home Depot in Illinois, specifically in a garden center called Grand Flowers. As a florist, she had been there for about 6 years, starting when she was a teenager in 2006. By 2012, she still loved her job because it was seasonal and she would still get paid during the winter months. This was perfect for her since her baby was due in late 2012. Alicia appreciated that her job allowed her to take time off to be with her newborn while still providing for both of them. Life seemed to be moving in a wonderful direction for 21-year-old Alicia Bronfield. She had so much to look forward to, graduating soon and welcoming her little girl into the world. She felt happy and content, dreaming about the future. But sadly, fate had other plans. Alicia would never see those dreams come true. In the summer of 2012, she became the victim of a terrible crime. On August 19, 2012, a Sunday, a man walked into a gas station in Door County, Wisconsin, which is almost a 5-hour drive from Plainfield. This 36-year-old man approached the clerk behind the counter, soaked from head to toe. He asked if he could use their phone to call 911 and report an emergency. The clerk, likely puzzled by the man's strange appearance and request, agreed to help him. The gas station clerk called 911 for the man in the soaking wet clothes. When an operator answered, she handed the phone to him. It was then that the man said, "I'd like to report a murder, please." The operator was shocked and asked if he was sure that murder had happened. "Yes," he replied firmly. When the operator asked who committed the man calmly confessed, "I did." He admitted to killing a young woman in his hotel room the night before in Door County. When asked if it was an accident, he answered without hesitation, "It was intentional." The operator replied, "Okay, well, you're doing the right thing. I'm glad you called me." The man responded, "I'm a good person. Besides what I did last night, Alicia's family is going to flip. Everyone is going to flip." As you might have guessed, Alicia Bronfield was the young woman he had killed. But who was this mysterious man in wet clothes? Why was Alicia in Door County, Wisconsin, when she lived in Plainfield, Illinois? What events led to this terrible tragedy? Before we explore that, let's learn more about Alicia's killer. His name was Brian Cooper. At 36 years old, he was 15 years older than Alicia and also from Plainfield. As it turned out, Brian was Alicia's boss. She worked as a florist for a company that supplied flowers to Home Depot, and Brian Cooper was her supervisor, the regional manager. They had worked together for about 5 years. However, Brian Cooper was not a good person. He was an abusive and manipulative boss who had been blackmailing and trying to take advantage of Alicia for a long time. Things didn't start out badly between Alicia and Brian when they first began working together at the garden center. At first, Alicia thought he was nice and friendly. They got along well and quickly became good friends. However, it soon became clear that Brian Cooper saw Alicia as more than just a friend. He developed a romantic interest in her, even though he was 15 years older. Alicia was just a teenager when she started at Home Depot, while Brian was already a grown man. Brian made his feelings clear. He began making advances toward Alicia, often saying inappropriate things. He even introduced her as his girlfriend to others, which was far from the truth. To everyone else, they were never in any kind of romantic relationship because Alicia did not feel the same way about him. Yet, Brian continued to lie, convinced that they were together. Using his position as her supervisor, Brian tried to control many parts of Alicia's life. He would call and text her constantly outside of work, pretending he needed to discuss work matters. But really, he just wanted to talk to her all the time and find out who she was with and what she was doing. He often suggested they meet up outside of work and even asked if she could walk his dog sometimes to get her to come over to his house. Brian's jealousy grew whenever he saw Alicia talking to other male employees. There were times when he told her she couldn't take a lunch break if he found out she planned to spend it with another man. He made it very clear that he was attracted to her, using intimidation and manipulation to keep her close. This unhealthy dynamic marked the beginning of a troubling relationship that would ultimately lead to tragedy. Alicia never returned Brian's feelings, constantly pushing away his advances. It must have been incredibly hard for her to deal with such an uncomfortable situation, especially at a young age. She had no interest in Brian Cooper and likely felt disgusted by his behavior. In her mind, she must have wondered what she could do about it. After all, he was her boss and held control over her job and income. He could fire her at any moment, making up an excuse if he wanted. While Alicia tried to show that she didn't feel the same way, she didn't confront him directly at first. She probably wanted to keep things peaceful and let him down gently so she could maintain a friendly atmosphere at work and, more importantly, keep her job. She was willing to be friends with Brian, but nothing more. However, this only seemed to make Brian angrier. He was upset that Alicia didn't share his feelings and began verbally abusing her at work. He would shout and curse at her, calling her terrible names. One time, when Alicia asked for a day off, he angrily called her a derogatory term. He wanted her to be at work all the time and didn't care who heard his insults, even customers. The worst part was that Brian's bosses knew about his behavior. According to court documents, Alicia filed complaints about him multiple times during her years at the company. One manager even saw Alicia burst into tears after Brian refused to let her take a lunch break. On another occasion, she told her group leader that she didn't want to be left alone with him because she felt unsafe. Despite alerting other supervisors and managers about the misconduct, nothing was done. Brian was neither fired nor suspended for his actions, leaving Alicia feeling trapped in a hostile work environment. They simply suggested he take an anger management course. Reports showed that Brian not only verbally abused Alicia but also threw things and slammed objects in anger whenever she did something he didn't like. Despite this, he never completed the anger management course, and no one bothered to check on him afterward. Shockingly, they did not remove him as Alicia's supervisor. As a result, the abuse and harassment continued. Alicia tried to keep things friendly and stay in Brian's good graces as an employee, but he only took advantage of her kindness. He would even blackmail her into going on business trips with him, claiming it was part of her job. But in reality, it was just a way for him to spend more time with her. When Alicia said she didn't want to go on these trips, Brian would threaten to cut her hours or even fire her. This pressure ultimately led to Alicia agreeing to go with him to Wisconsin in August 2012. However, this trip was not work-related. Brian wanted her to accompany him to his sister's wedding. He insisted that they would go as friends, nothing more. Once again, Alicia found herself in a tough spot. She didn't want to go to the wedding, but Brian had threatened to cut her hours and fire her many times before. Terrified of losing her job, especially now that she was 6.5 months pregnant, she felt she had no choice. With her baby girl due to arrive in late 2012, Alicia relied on her job for income. As a single mother, she couldn't afford to lose her job or tell Brian Cooper no. So, very reluctantly, Alicia agreed to attend his sister's wedding as his plus one. In the back of her mind, she might have hoped that by doing this favor for him, he would ease up on her at work and stop his inappropriate behavior. At just 21 years old, navigating such a complicated situation was overwhelming. On August 18, 2012, Brian and Alicia left Plainfield, Illinois, for the 4-hour drive to Door County, Wisconsin, where the wedding would take place. Alicia told her mother, Sherry, that they would be attending the wedding and returning to Plainfield the next morning. She expected it to be a quick trip. However, Alicia never made it back home. On the morning of August 19, 2012, Brian Cooper walked into a gas station in Door County and asked the clerk if he could use their phone to call 911. He claimed he needed to report a murder, his employee, Alicia Bronfield. Following the phone call, police officers rushed to the gas station. They ordered Brian Cooper to get down on the ground and arrested him, taking him in for questioning. Meanwhile, other officers headed to the hotel where Alicia and Brian were staying in Door County. Brian had booked a room at a place called the Sand Bay Beach Resort. Before the trip, he had lied to Alicia, saying that the entire wedding party was staying there, which made her feel safer about going. However, that was not true. It was just Brian and Alicia at the resort, and he hadn't even booked separate rooms for them. They were sharing a room with 2 beds. Officers arrived at the resort and entered their room. Tragically, they found the body of 21-year-old Alicia Bronfield, and her unborn baby, Ava Lucille, had also died because of her mother's murder. When detectives walked into the room, they saw Alicia lying on her back on the floor. A pillow was under her head, and she was partially covered with a blanket, though she was naked beneath it. Upon closer inspection, police noticed that Alicia had many injuries. She had defensive wounds from where she had tried to fight back against her attacker. Her body was covered in bruises, showing a violent struggle between her and Brian. It was clear that she fought desperately for her life. Forensic teams were called in to examine the scene further, take photographs, and collect evidence. Meanwhile, Brian Cooper's interview was happening at the police station. He had already confessed to being responsible for Alicia's death. The detectives needed to understand exactly what happened, how Brian Cooper killed Alicia, and what led him to make that terrible decision. Investigator Mark Winkle from the Door County Sheriff's Office conducted the interview with Brian. He sat down with him and asked for his version of Alicia's murder and the events leading up to it. Brian explained that he and Alicia were in Door County for his sister's wedding, where he was supposed to walk her down the aisle, and Alicia was his plus one. In his interview, he claimed that they were co-workers and somewhat dating, which was far from the truth. Alicia's best friend, Olivia, stated in a true crime documentary that Alicia had never shown any romantic interest in Brian. If they had been dating, she would have told her best friend, but she never did. It was clear that Brian was lying. He went on to say that he had always wanted to be in a relationship with Alicia, but claimed he had been trying to back off out of respect for her pregnancy. This reasoning seemed ridiculous. How could he think that being respectful involved continuing to sexually harass her at work and blackmailing her into doing things against her will? Brian then recounted that once they arrived in Door County, he and Alicia got into a huge argument before the wedding. The details of their argument were unclear. Maybe it was about his lie regarding the wedding party staying at the same resort or the fact that they were sharing a room instead of having separate ones. Whatever the reason, Alicia was so angry that she decided she would not attend the wedding anymore. She even sent a text message to her mother, Sherry, saying she was coming straight home. However, it seemed they had somewhat resolved their argument because just a couple of hours later, Alicia sent another message saying she had decided to stay. She agreed to go to the wedding and planned to come home the next morning as originally intended. Brian claimed in his interview that even though Alicia agreed to attend the wedding, she made it clear that once they returned to Plainfield, she was done with him. She had tolerated his abusive behavior and harassment for too long and would no longer be his friend. They went to the wedding where photos were taken of them together. In those pictures, Alicia smiled, but it was clear she was just putting on a brave face to get through the day. This would be the last favor she ever did for Brian Cooper. After attending the wedding and the after-party, they returned to their hotel room at the resort shortly after midnight. In the early hours of August 19th, Brian said that when they got back, Alicia went straight to bed. She wanted to sleep so she could wake up in the morning and go home. But Brian did not go to sleep. He continued drinking alcohol, which he had been doing throughout the evening. As Alicia slept, Brian paced around the hotel room, smoking cigarettes and drinking. With each passing moment, his anger grew because he was furious at Alicia for deciding that they would not have any kind of relationship anymore. In his mind, he thought, "How dare you?" He was infuriated by her decision to cut ties completely. Brian was not used to this loss of control. He had always held power over Alicia in the workplace as her supervisor. Now, he felt that power slipping away from him. Alicia had finally reached her breaking point. She stood her ground and told Brian, "No, enough is enough. I won't tolerate the way you've been treating me anymore. I'm not going to be your friend." She made it clear that she would no longer accept his unprofessional behavior and the discomfort he caused her. This declaration infuriated Brian because he didn't want to lose her or the control he had over her. In his interview, Brian described his mindset at that moment, saying, "I was debating what I was doing and I was doing some prepping. I was thinking about harming her." He considered tying Alicia up while she slept with electrical cords but quickly decided against it. Alicia moved too much in her sleep, making it too risky to restrain her without waking her up. Eventually, after a couple of hours, Alicia did wake up. When she did, Brian casually asked if she wanted to watch a movie when they returned to Plainfield the next day. But Alicia firmly replied no, sticking to her word that there would be no friendship between them once they got home. This response sent Brian into a deeper rage. In an instant, he jumped on top of Alicia on the bed, straddling her and wrapping his hands around her neck. Terrified and panicked, Alicia fought back desperately, pleading with him not to kill her because of the baby. She shouted, "Think of the baby. Don't do this to me because of the baby." Hearing those words is heart-wrenching. In her final moments, she was not just thinking of herself but trying to save the life of her unborn daughter. But Brian didn't care. He admitted, "At that moment I didn't care," and continued his attack. During the struggle, they fell off the bed onto the floor. In a desperate attempt to escape, Alicia bit down on one of his fingers. But Brian managed to regain control and held her down, continuing to strangle her until she was dead. Alicia's tragic fate took a horrifying turn when Brian Cooper made a terrible choice instead of calling an ambulance to save her unborn baby. He removed Alicia's clothing and assaulted her lifeless body on the floor of the hotel room. In his interview, he stated, "I just wanted to see her naked, I guess." Afterward, he covered Alicia's body with a blanket and placed a pillow under her head. Feeling overwhelmed by what he had done, Brian contemplated taking his own life. He clearly did not want to face the consequences of his actions or the reality of being arrested and having everyone discover his crime. He attempted to kill himself with a knife and a corkscrew but was unsuccessful. Instead, he went to sleep in the bathroom, curling up in the bathtub. When he woke up later that morning, he tried again to end his life. He left the hotel and attempted to drown himself in a nearby bay. Once again, he failed. This was why he was dripping wet when he walked into the gas station. He had just come from the bay. After driving to the gas station, he called 911 and confessed that he had just committed murder. Following this confession, Detective Winkle asked Brian if he had ever hurt anyone else or had more victims. Brian admitted that while he had never killed anyone else, he had been abusive toward an ex-girlfriend. He recounted an incident where, during an argument, he tied her up so he could talk to her. Despite this admission, he never faced punishment because she did not report him to the police. It's likely she was too terrified of what he might do if she did. After discovering Alicia's body, her family was quickly informed of the tragic news. Not only was she dead, but so was her baby. Brian Cooper was charged with third-degree assault and 2 counts of intentional homicide, one for Alicia's death and another for the death of her unborn daughter. As Brian Cooper awaited his court proceedings, police continued to build their case against him. They collected a large amount of evidence, including his detailed confession on tape. Additionally, they had proof of the years of abuse and harassment he inflicted on Alicia both at work and outside of it. The investigation uncovered incredibly disturbing evidence on Brian's computer. Among the files, police found several videos he had secretly recorded of Alicia without her knowledge. These videos not only highlighted his obsession with her, but also revealed just how twisted he truly was. You may remember that Alicia occasionally walked Brian's dog for him. The police discovered that he had been secretly recording her during these visits. He had hidden a camera in his bathroom, placing it behind a shelf with a tiny hole drilled for the lens to poke through. This camera was positioned directly in front of the toilet, allowing him to film Alicia using the bathroom. He would watch these recordings repeatedly, but that wasn't all. Without her knowledge, Brian had also set up a hidden camera in their resort bathroom in Door County before her murder. One of the videos captured Alicia as she stepped out of the shower, completely unaware she was being filmed. The police also found that Brian's mobile phone password was Alicia's birthday, further demonstrating his unhealthy obsession with her. With such a strong case against him, you might think justice would be swift. However, when it came time for his plea hearing, Brian Cooper shocked everyone by pleading not guilty. Brian Cooper had already confessed to Alicia's murder, yet he was now pleading not guilty. He wasn't denying that he caused Alicia's death. Instead, he claimed he was not responsible because he was voluntarily intoxicated. This defense tactic was new to many, and learning about it was infuriating. During the trial, the defense argued that Brian could not be held accountable for his actions that night. Specifically, for Alicia's death and the death of her unborn baby, because he was so drunk from the alcohol he consumed after his sister's wedding that he didn't really know what he was doing. They claimed he couldn't form the criminal intent necessary to commit the crime. This reasoning was appalling. The idea of excusing his actions by blaming alcohol, something he willingly consumed, was disgusting. It felt shameful to suggest that his intoxication absolved him of responsibility for such horrific acts. The police and prosecution saw through this tactic immediately. They pointed out the glaring contradiction. If Brian was so intoxicated that he couldn't control himself, how could he recall every detail of the murder in his first interview with Detective Winkle? He described everything, from the argument with Alicia before the murder to his thoughts about tying her up with electrical cords, how he jumped on her, fought with her on the bed, rolled off onto the floor, strangled her to death, assaulted her body, and then covered her with a blanket. He recounted these events in thorough detail, which contradicted his defense's claim of being too drunk to remember. If he truly had been that inebriated, one would expect him to barely recall anything at all. Furthermore, let's not forget that in his confession, Brian admitted that this crime was planned. As I mentioned, the voluntary intoxication defense means that the amount of alcohol consumed by the accused prevents them from forming criminal intent. Yet, Brian had stated in his confession, "I was debating what I was doing and I was doing some prepping. I was thinking about harming her." This admission clearly indicated premeditation. Unbelievably, the jury could not reach a consensus. Brian Cooper's trial for murder ended in a hung jury, with a vote of 10-2. The jurors could not agree on whether to find him guilty or not guilty, which left everyone baffled. The prosecution was stunned, believing they had a rock-solid case. The police were shocked, and Alicia's family was heartbroken. But what upset Alicia's mother, Sherry, the most was that the two jurors who sided with Cooper's defense were women. These two women decided that he should not be held accountable for the killing of an innocent young woman and her unborn baby simply because he was drunk. Although Brian Cooper was found guilty of third-degree sexual assault, the hung jury on the murder charges meant he would have to face trial again for those charges. While waiting for the second trial of her daughter's killer, Sherry felt she could not just sit idly by. She was disgusted by the fact that voluntary intoxication could even be used as a defense strategy in a murder trial. Determined to prevent other families from experiencing similar pain, especially witnessing their loved one's killer trying to blame alcohol for homicide, Sherry sprang into action. She began campaigning alongside Alicia's other family members and friends to get this legal strategy banned as a defense tactic. They worked tirelessly to raise awareness about their cause, writing letters, creating online petitions, and meeting with legislators in Wisconsin to advocate for change. Thankfully, all of Sherry and her family's hard work paid off. In April 2014, nearly 2 years after Alicia's murder, Governor Scott Walker signed a bill that officially banned the voluntary intoxication defense from Wisconsin law. This was a significant victory, as the defense strategy was eventually prohibited in 32 other states as well, all thanks to Sherry and her family. It was an incredible relief for them. However, despite this achievement, the new law would not apply to Brian Cooper's second trial for murder charges due to the hung jury from the first trial. His second trial took place in May 2014. Since Alicia's murder occurred before the bill was signed, Brian's defense team could still use the intoxication defense during this trial. Once again, he claimed, "I was so drunk I couldn't help myself. I can't be held accountable." Fortunately, this time the jury saw through his excuse. After just 1 hour of deliberation, they found him guilty of first-degree murder for both Alicia Bronfield and her unborn baby, Ava Lucille. As a result, he received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, meaning he would likely die behind bars. In the aftermath of her daughter's murder, Sherry took further action. She filed a lawsuit against Home Depot, the employer of both Brian Cooper and Alicia Bronfield. It was discovered that not only had Brian's employers known about his abuse and harassment toward Alicia in the workplace, but other female co-workers had also filed complaints against him for inappropriate behavior, some even before Alicia began working there or before he turned his attention to her. One former Home Depot employee named Jessica had just graduated from high school when she started working there. She was very young, and just like Alicia, Brian Cooper, the much older man, took an inappropriate sexual interest in her. He made this very obvious at work. According to court documents, he would tell others that Jessica was his girlfriend and would shout and swear at her. His behavior mirrored what he had done to Alicia. He made crude comments about his and even rubbed himself against her, effectively sexually assaulting her. Feeling uncomfortable and unsafe, Jessica went to her group leader to report Brian's behavior. However, nothing was done. He wasn't fired. Feeling she had no other option, Jessica decided to quit her job because of Brian Cooper. In response to these events, Sherry filed a lawsuit against Home Depot, claiming that their negligence contributed to her daughter's murder. She believed that if they had acted to protect their female employees by firing Brian Cooper, Alicia might still be alive. Initially, Sherry's lawsuit was dismissed by the courts, but she appealed the decision. In 2017, the court reversed the dismissal, allowing her to file the lawsuit again. Unfortunately, I couldn't find information on the outcome of this lawsuit online, whether Sherry won or if she and Alicia's family received any compensation. I hope they did. They certainly deserve it.